We always say it. We keep it real. Whose America is this? It's your America. It doesn't belong to the politicians. They may think it does. It doesn't belong to the White House. It belongs to the people's house. And we're going to start off our interview today with Becky Lou Hobbs, and she's going to tell us, she's running for school board, and she's going to tell you what district it is and some of the issues that are rolling through that process. And she'll tell you a little bit about what she has to face out there and some of the things that she's dealing with throughout this campaign. And she'll also talk about her vision and her platform. So welcome to the show, Becky, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks for having me, Ricky. Well, I grew up in Wake County. My dad retired to Wake County from the Navy when I was just 10 years old. And so before then, we moved around a lot. I went to 5 different elementary schools. And when we moved here, finished out my educational career in the Wake County public school system with middle and high school in Cary. Went to NC State, got a bachelor's of science. Over the years, I've done a few different things, but for the past 20 years, I've really been focusing on business. Do a lot of work with international contracts and policy development. But fast forward a few years, my children started entering the public school system in 2012, and definitely a very different world than I was familiar with growing up. Right. There's a lot of things that I thought the kids were not being taught, a lot of things that I thought were skewed, right. But I never really could have any proof as to what was wrong. We weren't getting textbooks. We didn't have any agendas to tell us what was being taught in the classroom, or really at the mercy of if the teacher decided to text us or email us what was going on. Because, when you have kids, asking them what happened in the classroom. Oh yeah. It's even worse when they get to be, when they get to be teenagers, it's even worse. So, COVID hit, and then of course the kids were sent home to supposedly learn, and we got a really good look behind the curtain. And hey, now I downloaded a lot of things of what they were being taught because it was just not appropriate. And I was very frustrated. I started emailing my representative at that time, who was Keith Sutton. District 4 of the Wake County School Board is in East Raleigh. Starts like a downtown East Raleigh, goes out towards the Neuse River, and then that gets into Knightdale and picks up most of Knightdale. But he never responded to me all that time. So I started going to the school board. So October of 2021 was the first time I physically attended a school board in person and spoke. And it was really about the same. We'd speak, and they would be glassy-eyed. They would text. They would be paying attention to anybody other than the people who were speaking. It was just really a farce. Right. So that frustration really built and built and built. And I kept trying to find out, somebody's got to run against Keith Sutton. Somebody else has to step up. He had been in the office for over 10 years. And, it was just everything that he and the board has been doing has been completely agenda driven and not focusing on the education of the kids, because the quality of education has just declined so much in the past 10 years. Right. When you look at the scores and across the board for Wake County, there's been a steady decline, and this is before COVID hit. But what really, was the final straw was when Keith Sutton exited, tried to appoint somebody who didn't reside in the district to represent the district. And I was like, I'm done. I'm going to run. This is the last thing I ever imagined myself doing, was running for public office. This is, not a life goal. I'll tell you that right now. But my kids aren't getting the education that they deserve. My neighbors' kids are not getting the education they deserve. And even just reading the state standards, believe it or not, cursive is on the 3rd and the 4th grade standards of what they're supposed to learn. They're not even getting taught that, and it's on the state standards. So, just bring the quality of education back to Wake County, having board transparency, because they do so much behind closed curtains. And if you've ever heard me talk to anybody, I am constantly picking apart the budget. We have a $2.1 billion operating budget, $2.1 billion. And when you add the capital improvements, it's over $3 billion. And I looked at the budget 10 years ago. Our operating budget 10 years ago, it's increased that $1 billion. It was only about 200 million. I mean, that's how much has increased in a 10-year period of time. The operating budget increased from 1.2 billion to 2.1 billion. That's about a 65% increase. And all that's happening when you look at the budgets, it's a lot of additional, what I call administrative positions. And that may be the wrong way to term it, but you have a lot of these central services positions, high-level administrative positions that are just adding fluff to the schools, to the school, but they're not delivering a quality education. We don't know what they're delivering.
And sometimes because school boards use the budget once they get the money simply as a suggestion on what to do with it, they end up doing what they want to do with it. And then you have superintendents who believe, and for all intents and purposes, that they're sitting on the throne and they make the decisions. And what you find out is that headquarters downtown gets the bulk of the funding because they create new positions to take care of the new issues that they bring up, like through COVID and the things that we had. And so, it's just they make positions up as they go to be able to
pretty much that's what's been happening. You looked, and there's new chief positions. So you have the superintendent and then you have the chiefs. So there's two new of that level. Those salaries are in the upper 100s to mid $200,000. Yeah, I went through and I added up for the last salary payroll that I've gotten, because that's public information. There was about 115 positions that make over $100,000 that are not teachers, principals, or vice principals. 115 that added up to just shy of $14 million. How
many children do you think that would educate, and how smaller could you make the classroom size?
Well, I did the math. We have 10,500 teachers. So that would give 10,500 teachers $1,000 raise and have some change left over.
Right. And when you look at that, I mean, it's that number is so big, and it's kind of like, and I'm going to talk about it is that the budget, is that the will and pleasure of the superintendent, his will, his pleasure, and he's going to do what he generally wants to do.
Pretty much. They set the budget, but they've been operating on this proposed budget that they put out in May. They still haven't passed it. The last time they said they were going to vote on it, that it was set for the first meeting in October. So of course we don't have the agenda until that Friday before. So I won't know for sure if they're actually going to vote on it next week or not. Right. But the way they they publish this proposed budget, but then the way they propose these changes, they're in a completely different format, and it's virtually impossible to match things up in how they're going to make the changes.
And what would you do to change some of these things as far as what you're talking about? How would you go about that kind of change, and what kind of changes would you make?
Well, there's a few different things. First, I would evaluate the effectiveness of these positions. Some of them may be effective, but in business, you have to have show your return on investment. So when we have a new item that we buy for our company, we have to show how that is going to improve the company making that expenditure. So we have all these high-level positions that have been added to the budget over the past 10 years, more than doubling our administrative staff hours. And we need to show why, because when you look at our student scores, they've declined. So how are these positions effective if our student scores have declined? Number two, when you look at the category, there's a category for textbooks, which drives me insane. It's been in there each year for the past 10 years. Of course, the dollar amounts change. The current budget has it at $5 million. I've had students in the system since 2012. I've never seen a textbook. What is this being spent on? And once again, when I've submitted public information requests, what the office replies back and says, oh, just check Simbly and you can get all the contracts there. Well, once again, it is such a mess. You don't know what's been coded to what category, because when you're in accounting, this category is this number, and this category is that, you go through everything. Well, when they sign off on a contract, it doesn't tell you what category it's being attributed to. So you kind of have to guess.
This might be one of the things that they read it after they sign it. You just
Oh,
never
yeah,
know.
no, definitely. Well, and that was, I flipped my lid when I saw the legal contract for the year. $1.375 million for the contract with the attorney. And there was no itemization or anything on that. No percentage of this percentage is going to be human resource related. This percentage is going to be related to running the school board meetings. They should, he's been our attorney, that firm's been our attorney for, I believe, 10 years.
Well,
they should be able to
they do that
categorize
research. A lot of them will say research purposes, X amount of dollars. The reality is, and in most cases now, when you talk to an attorney, they're going to say, well, where did you get your information from? Send me that information, send me that research. And then you get billed for their research time, which is great number.
Right.
So,
I mean, and I'm honest, the rate per hour of the attorney firm is very reasonable. I work with a lot of attorneys all over the world. I don't bash their hourly price. I'm upset that we're signed such a large contract that we're for, and there's no itemization of what what types of legal work that is going to go to.
You don't know what the content is. You don't know.
Right.
There's nothing that you can look at.
There's so much in the legal field because, the attorney is advising the board. The attorney is advising human resources matters. The attorney is going to be advising hiring and firing. The attorneys are going to be advising on any kind of actual cases or litigation, real estate purchases, any types of issues regarding these contracts that have been purchased for any of the educational material could involve some legal standings. There's legal work just involved in getting the insurance that Wake County needs. So there's all this stuff that's all just wrapped up in this one number and not even rough percentages. I just find that very irresponsible. And I know in the business world, if I had taken that to my CEO,
oh yeah,
he would not be happy with me at all. I mean, yeah.
Absolutely.
And then the other,
go ahead.
Yeah. And the other budget item, there's a big nebulous item called contracts. It's a little over $40 million, which, in the scope of things is not a whole lot. But, when you're talking about over a $2 billion budget, but the thing is, okay, the last school board meeting, the board approved yet another SEL program for about, I believe it was $500,000 for a 1-year contract. So what that means is if they continue it, that means we're going to be saddled with that price each year. But the thing is we've bought SEL programs before, regardless of if you like SEL programs or not. They've purchased a lot of them. Why do we have to keep continuing to buy the latest and greatest program that requires these continual licenses year in, year out? It's just wasting money down the toilet. The
For
advantage
some of the
of
people that want to know, what is the program that you're talking about?
SEL is social emotional learning, and it's the Committee for Children was the company this was from this particular program, and it was supposed to be bullying. And the thing is, looking at a program at a computer, that's not going to deter bullying. And when you look at this company's website, it talks about transforming your child and all these key words that is like, it is not the school's job to transform my child. The school's job is to provide an education. The moral upbringing of my child is the parent's responsibility.
Absolutely.
Pure, plain and simple. And it's not the responsibility of the school to provide a moral upbringing for our children.
Well, let me tell you, when I work with the schools so much, the schools now have taken on that role willfully. When I was, working within the school system, they were like, well, you need to check with the parents. We get the parents, we talk to the parents. Now their concept and their oversight is go ahead and jump in and tell the children what they need to think because we think their parents are raising them inappropriately, and we need to open our eyes to the vast majority of things out there. When in reality, that, like you said, that's up to the parents to teach their children. You know,
Right.
it
Yeah.
is. That's
My,
just
my job as a mother, and I will say mother because that's also been on the table of taking where calling mother and father, because
right.
that's been removed from some of the online systems. There have been speakers at the school board saying how insulting that is, and it burns my skin. I'm a mom.
Mhm.
Yeah, I know what it's like to come home from the hospital and you didn't come home with your baby,
Right.
and it's a pain I wouldn't wish on anybody. But I'm a mother, and nobody is going to take that title away from me because they're getting their feelings hurt. If they're getting their feelings hurt over a simple word like that,
Yeah. Well, it's
I
like
mean, they need to
everybody
grow
wears the
a little
emotions
bit
on their
thicker skin.
sleeve. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's. I tell the guys. I was law enforcement 35 years, and I used to tell them when they come to me, "Look, guys, you're grown up, act it. I don't want to hear it. Quit wearing your feelings on your sleeve. Put your big boy pants on, and let's roll. Get over it. Suck it up."
Right.
Everybody goes, "Oh man, he just like he can't. He don't understand." Well, look, it's not my job to understand the employee who's supposed to be trained to do their job and only their job, and not mom and dad's job. So
Mm-hmm.
that's not what teachers are supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And no more than you're supposed to be a great mathematician for the school
Right.
system while you're sitting at home.
Right. Well, I tell my kids, and I a lot of people that are around me understand my thought process. I'm responsible to behave responsibly, behave like an adult, behave like the Christian that I am called to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I am made in the way that God made me, but at the same time, I'm not responsible for how you feel, because how you feel is up to you. And I can say one thing and 20 different people are going to feel 20 different ways about it. It's mind-boggling that we've gotten to that point in the society, and I don't agree with that. When kids go back to school, when our kids are in school, I constantly say the school's job is to provide a quality education. Every decision the school makes, who they hire, who they fire, what curriculum they purchase, what programs they purchase, how they build a school, everything needs to be measured by, does it provide the children a good quality education?
Absolutely. And Michelle, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Thank you. I'm doing great. How are you guys? I'm always enjoying hearing Becky because she's a wealth of knowledge.
Yes, she is. And like I said, I always like to kind of, when you start using initials, I like to inform the listeners and those watching at home what those initials are. Because when I was, before I got delved into government, the initials to me were just initials that I didn't understand. Once I realized what they were, it really ticked me off because now I'm informed. So now
yeah, well, the alphabet soup is really a dangerous game to get into. You need anything on any level of government, you need to be wary when they start using the letters.
Oh yeah, absolutely, without a doubt. So Michelle, how are
did
you
know
doing
you
today?
can reverse your camera so your name comes out okay?
No. I'm an IT loser.
Hey, look, I had to learn that myself before doing all this. I found out I had I was doing something one day and my whole screen was like upside down. I'm like, no, if I wanted to do that, I really couldn't.
I know. I thought, I'll just turn it around, but then it's the same thing. Turn it around.
Yeah, that's okay. It's just one click away. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
So it took a while to figure some of this stuff out. I'm still kind of probably a novice compared to a lot of other folks, but the reality is it can be tough. You probably have to do it beforehand when you sign on, because I tried to do that and I always disconnect myself. So
Michelle, you click on the little settings, the little gearbox, and there's going to be one in there for video, and when it says mirror camera, uncheck it.
Yeah, it's
you mean the 3 dots that are in my thingy?
Should be
video settings.
Should be a gear.
See it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Video settings. Let me see. Maybe we can do this in real time.
I love that. I love these things.
Off. Oh wow, this is gonna work, y'all. You just taught me something.
This is what makes it so cool when you're doing these things. You can do what you want. Do what you want.
I
That's a
get.
great
I've
part.
got the mirror camera. No, it won't let me slide it over. Slide over.
Oh, okay.
You might
Maybe
have
it's
to
because,
before you sign on. Then
yeah, it might be
Don't
because
worry. Don't
you're
worry.
live now. So
yeah.
Yeah.
So that if you turn it on, it might turn you back to everybody. You just never know.
Yeah. It might
So,
jump behind me and get the back of my head.
well, Michelle, what's been going on in your race? And introduce yourself to the listeners and the viewers here.
Okay, I am Michelle Morrow, and I am running for school board here in District 9, which covers majority of Cary, a little bit of Morrisville, and a small part of Northern Apex. And so I'm running for school board because I'm a mom of 5, and I'm concerned about the direction of our school system. I'm concerned about our safety for our kids, not just physical safety, but the emotional and the intellectual safety of our youngest citizens. And I'm very upset with the mismanagement of our time as well as our resources. And I think that we need to get people in there who understand budget. They understand how to prioritize what is most important. And I think we need to get back to the basics of education and ensure that after 5 days a week, not 8 hours a day, 9 months out of the year for 13 years, our kids are ready to workforce, pursue their career goals, and be ready to give back to the community that has just raised them up. And I think we have the know-how to do that. We, at one point, 30 years ago, we were one of the greatest, strongest school systems in the entire country. And I think we have just taken a road that has taken us away from the right priorities of scholastics. And I think we need to get back on that track. I feel like we have been we've been forcing, quite frankly, our young people to participate in a social experiment, and it has failed. And it's time for us to stop that and get back to educating the next generation.
And like you said, reading, writing, and arithmetic. Those are the
That would be
three that you
nice.
really go in. So yeah, get back to the basics. I'm always amazed when you hear about other countries, whether it's China or whoever, how intelligent these children are, and you realize they're to the basics. They're not asking you how you feel about doing math. Has no place in it. I mean, look, when I was in school, I didn't like science. Nobody asked me how I felt about it.
That's right.
I either did it.
Go ahead.
I either did it or you went past.
That's right. And I think we've got to get back to that order. We've got to get back to that expectation that teachers are to be respected, that children are expected to do their absolute best. And, to the point that you guys are talking about with the social emotional learning, I really feel like these things can all be summed up in the rules that I had when I was in elementary school. And that's you hand and wait your turn to talk. You respect the teacher, you work hard, you keep your hands to yourself, and you use kind words. I don't know how that has to be translated into millions of dollars every year of training our teacher to be sensitive to this group of people or sensitive to that group of people or sensitive. This is the truth. Teachers go into teaching because they love kids. They go into teaching naturally because they maybe had an excellent experience with several of their teachers, and they want to have that impact on the next generation. If you have to teach a teacher, if you have to drill into their head through hours and hours of training to be sensitive to a student or to not highlight their differences or their weaknesses, they shouldn't be a teacher. And quite honestly, I think it's offensive to those that have been through teaching to make them have to go through these trainings as though they don't understand how to treat children with kindness and with compassion. They absolutely do know those things. And so I feel like we've gone to the point of everyone is now a victim. They're a victim of a diagnosis. They're a victim of the circumstances of their life. They're the victim of how somebody looked at them or whether they use the wrong pronoun or how they feel in their body. And it's like, if we would just focus our young people on, they love to learn. I tell people, young children, they are the first ones to raise their hand and ask questions, and they're interested and they're intrigued and they want to investigate and they want to have hands-on experiences. And we are talking to them incessantly about philosophical and social ideologies that we as adults can't even agree on. Our kids
Right.
are not able to handle this. Can we just
Well,
focus
yeah,
classroom time?
you touched on their behaving like a victim. We've gone from having our kids be responsible to
Right.
teaching them how to be victims, and
That's right.
therein lies the problem. There is a lot to do in society that requires personal responsibility,
That's right.
Absolutely.
but we're
I,
raising a generation that doesn't understand that. They're being trained to be victims.
well, I'm sitting here listening to y'all, and I love it because I'm sitting here every time I think of it with one word, the next word, I'm already thinking ahead, and y'all popping the same words right after. And I'm sitting here thinking just so much online of my philosophy, especially with children or anybody else. We go through life and we worried about somebody's emotional state of mind on just the basic things that are very simplistic, it's just the simple things. They grow up to be, I'll just say, confused that people really care what they think all the time. And then they get their feelings hurt on in life. And how do you go through life with your feelings on your sleeve, thinking that everything you feel matters to somebody, when in reality, it doesn't? Because when it comes time to draw a paycheck and go to work, most people are going to tell you get to work. Now, there are
Yeah.
companies
One,
out there
one
that are
of the
jumping in it.
social emotional learning training videos that I saw was with a group of first graders. And it was, I wish I could remember the name of the program, 'cause it was a couple months ago when I saw it, but it would show the kids like a picture. And she said, it would show like a green square, but she said, just when you see this green square, answer orange circle. And she did a lot of examples like that. So what would happen, she'd show it and the kids would start looking around at each other, trying to see who had the answer. And they would try and do things together. It was an example of trying to do that group mentality
Group
thinking.
think.
And that's a, social emotional learning in one aspect sounds really good. You're trying, you want to be kind to others, you want to care about other people, but it's going beyond that. And
Well,
it's
it can
trying
become
to
bullying too. To me, it's a way. It's a different
it's
bullying.
trying to teach people to act as a group. And if you don't act as a group, then you're the problem.
That's right. And I often tell people that what do children want more than anything? They want to be accepted. They want to feel like they belong. They want to know that they're unique, that they're special, that there's something about them that people appreciate and want to be around. And if we will start focusing our children on helping them to figure out what is your great strength, what is your great passion, that is what school should be about. Obviously, we want to help them to learn the basics of education, but we also want to offer them an incredible array of what is out there, because not every student is going to excel in math. Not everyone's going to be an amazing writer, but you know what? Someone might be great at fixing things. They might have an engineering mind. They might have great at coming up with business ideas. They might be an entrepreneur at heart. They might be an artist. They might be, a great actor. Whatever it is, our schools should be offering all of these things. But the basic is this: if a child has mastered how to read, write, and do math by the time they exit elementary school, they can learn anything. But the problem is we're just pushing our students along from one grade to the next, to the next. Why? Because you can make data look good in any way, shape, or form. When I came on and you guys were talking about the budget and you were talking about all of this spending, what people aren't recognizing, and partly it's because we have not been taught civics for the last 20 years. So most people don't know how the government is even reacting. An example of
Absolutely.
my opponent, who is a young kid, 28 years old, and he has said repeatedly that if we just have more money, if we could just get the money from Leandro, and everybody, it's not going to impact your taxes. That's a lie. Like every dollar that the government has, whether it's state government or federal money, comes from the hardworking Americans that pay their taxes. And so what I tell people is,
and if any Leandro funding really doesn't come to Wake
well,
County,
what
because it
what
goes
he's
to the
talking about,
smaller
and
counties, but yeah.
right, but sadly, what they've done with Leandro is one of these appointed judges went and found a consulting firm out of California, because we know they're the bastion of liberty and excellent education. So they found them, this company called West Ed, and they've come up with this entire program that's not just for these 5 counties. It's for the entire state of North Carolina. In over 6 years' time, they will be spending $5.6 billion extra in if they implement this plan of action. And part of that is saying that Wake County, we'd be getting like 240 million or something like that per year extra as a result of this. But this is the problem. Whenever we ask the government to go in and start doling out more money, you know what comes with it? It comes strings that are attached. I like to call them nooses or chains, because that's basically what it does. So if you look at the money, even if you look at the federal funding that we get in a typical year, right? It's only 9.8% of our entire for Wake County. So it's like $2.1 million a year that we get here from the federal government. But do you know what?
Uh-oh.
Nope.
Should be back.
Yeah.
Yeah, which
Well,
I think
I
the federal
wanna say
mandates.
Yeah. I want to say something, she talked a little bit about the kids being pushed through. And I know for a fact that's happening because mine were pushed through. My oldest, who in middle school, failed English each year of middle school, and they just kept passing him along. Each year it got harder and harder for him because he was falling further behind. And they're so set on these graduation rates that they'll push any of the kids that they can through. And they're pushing them out the back end, and they're not prepared.
And they're doing that all over the country, because I do know Durham
Right.
doing the same thing. They're
Right.
more worried
Yeah,
about the
that's not
dropout
unique
rate.
to Wake County, but we're doing the kids a disservice by doing that.
They're more worried about dropout rate than they are success of the children. That's
Mhm,
what it amounts to.
mhm.
And because the bottom line is the money's per child, per student, the whole process. And I think you can spend wisely a lot. You can spend less money more wisely and get more accomplished with
Well,
less.
right now we have just under 160,000 students in the Wake County public school system. It's the 15th largest school system in the country. When you average it amongst that $2.1 billion operating budget, that works out to a little over $13,000 per child.
Mhm.
You know that you could send a child to Thales Academy for around a little over $7,000.
Yep, and I think that gets.
And there's
into
a bunch of other ones too that are all under that mark that are good education, and the kids have access to sports and theater and all these arts programs too.
Right. And a lot of it, when you look at it, a lot of people oppose the charter schools and stuff, but that's that's always should be some kind of option, because it's like, I want my child to be educated in a manner of which is reading, writing, arithmetic, but then I have a school that doesn't give me that, then that's
Right.
another problem. Then they don't need to be
Well,
there.
Wake County has a lot of resources. With all that, we should be able to provide resources for kids' needs. But one of the things I realized that Wake County also doesn't have is there are kids that have a really difficult time in large groups. Like the high schools are 1,500, 2,000 students. That can be overwhelming to some children.
Well, they're like little cities. I mean, if you
Right.
think about it, they're like little cities, and it's just, there
It's a
it gets
good
to
way
a
to think
point where
about
it's
it.
too big. It's way too
Mhm.
big.
Right.
to control.
And some of the elementary schools, one of the hardest problems for my boys from elementary to middle school was adjusting to middle school, because they went from a school that had about 250 kids to a school that had over 1,000 children. And it was
Right.
it was a shock for them.
Right. And it
Hey,
is.
Michelle.
Welcome back.
I just had to prove my IT loser skills. I'm using my son's computer because my daughter took it and I didn't even look. It was like not charged, so it just died.
Well, there you go. Well, look, your sign's fixed.
Yeah. Hey,
Looks
that's
good.
because I did my little settings thing.
Uh-huh.
There you go.
Well, you were on a roll when you kind of dropped out.
Oh, so
Yeah.
let me finish. So
welcome
what I
back.
think what I was saying, thank you. I think what I was saying was, by the time we by the time like $2.1 million, right, from the federal government. But if you look at the number of people that are being paid, there's almost 1,000 employees at the Department of Public Instruction. There, the federal government is the one that told us that not only do we have to have a Department of Equity and Inclusion, but every school needs to have equity officers in order for us to be getting this funding. So by the time you jump through these hoops and you hire all these people and you pay their salaries and you pay their benefits for the entire state, you've spent more than $2.1 million easily on all of those people to be doing the will of the federal government. And so that's what people aren't understanding, that along with any funding that you're getting from any government agency, there's going to be bureaucracy. There's going to be an expectation that you are going to toe the line and you have to be doing certain things. And those certain things always require more staff, which means more salaries and more benefits. And so I say what we truly need in every one of our counties here in North Carolina and around the country is we need board members who are going to be able to put their hand up to the state and to the federal government and say, no, we are going to allow the citizens of Wake County to determine what the priorities are in our school system. We are not just going to say, oh, free money, this is going to be great. We are going to look through that and look through it with a fine-tooth comb and say, what are the requirements and what is going to be the end product of the funding that we actually can put toward scholastics at the classroom level, into teacher salaries, into classroom resources, so that we can ensure that we have the absolute best outcome for our students. And to the other thing that we need to remember is when you were talking about the class size, when I came back in, we have upwards of 35, some classes have almost 40 students in them. And we have students all the way from having severe learning issues to being gifted and talented, and everything in between on the spectrum of, even per subject of what kids are able to do. There is no one teacher that is humanly capable of filling all of the needs, even scholastically, of all of these different students. And then you add on top of that, I'm talking to teachers every week that are still working in Wake County. They come and they say, listen, I'm coming to you, but it has to be anonymous. I can't, I can't lose my job. We need it for our family. But they're saying there's so much paperwork for everything. And if you have kids with IEPs, if you have children, that are on medications, if you have kids that are, across the entire spectrum, just imagine what that paperwork is becoming. And they don't have time to educate, which is why they became teachers. And that,
some of the teachers that I spoke to a few weeks ago, they estimated they spent 22 days of the classroom time in 1
month.
22 days for a school year. That's like that's a month out of the school year.
Right.
That's right. Yep. And the other thing that we aren't even thinking about is the teachers that are leaving. Most of them are leaving because they're not able to teach. And while I totally am in favor that our teachers should be paid well, absolutely, we have to examine that. And we need to provide for our teachers so that they don't have to work 2 jobs. That's ridiculous. Right. But we also need to see that there are teachers that are leaving teaching in the public realm and they're going to private schools to teach. And you know what? They're making less money on average at the private school, but there's not the same bureaucracy. There's not the same push for all these social, emotional, these social and these political and this racially charged curriculum that has infiltrated into Wake County.
Yeah, the curriculum it needs to get, politics needs to be out of it.
Yep.
It just needs to focus on the basics. We've talked over that a little bit before with the focus on the social and emotional learning. But when and I know when Michelle and I are in school about the same time, we had no idea the political parties of our teachers. Most of the times we didn't know if they were married or how many children they had,
how many kids
or
they had,
like that. It was just, we didn't know. We didn't ask. That wasn't something you talked about. That was, it was the teacher's business, and we just left it as is. And they've tried to integrate everything together, and it's just not appropriate.
Well, you know what I always equate that to, and I always talk when I'm talking to people when it comes to people who are so involved and they forget about the teaching aspect or what they're supposed to do. I was kind of the crime of their passion, because they're going to teach people what they need to believe, not what they need, outside the emotional skills. You need to teach people how to survive every day and not worry about what their affiliations are.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Exactly.
Absolutely. And Rick and Becky, we need to remember too, and we need to remind the voters of what this school board did in the last 2.5 years, because parents have been chided, they've been chastised, they have been rejected, they have been kept from even entering school buildings. They have worked hard to get their children medical exemptions from masks. I have been coming to school board meetings and watching them online for the last 4 years. I have talked at legislative meetings and, was invited up to the General Assembly several times during the pandemic and said, I was listening to parents, especially parents of special needs students, and they were in tears because the loss for their special needs students was not just scholastic. They were regressing in their emotional state. They were regressing in their ability to interact with others. They were seeing that their children were going back years in all of the incredible obstacles. It is hard for these children that have these, learning difficulties and these, disabilities. It's hard for them to make strides and to see victory even in themselves. And we were seeing it backpedal. And where did that fall? It fell on completely deaf ears. It fell on this cold-hearted group of people that were basically saying, you know what, we're going to do exactly what the DHHS tells us.
Right.
We're going to do what
to the point. Don't forget, in February, when they tried to mask 2, 3,
Yes.
and 4-year-olds,
Yeah.
they spent an hour debating whether or not they should do that. The thought that was even on the table is appalling.
Especially when
something like that over a child's mouth like that at that young age. And the children that were masked, the kindergartners, first and second graders, those are the ones that were hardest hit because they're trying to learn, what vowel sounds go with what letters. And if you can't see the mouth move, you can't make that connection. And that's why these children's reading levels was so adversely affected.
Yep. And one of my friends is a speech therapist, and she said, this is tragic. I mean, we are, children that were, going on, moving forward with just typical development. We are seeing now them in with therapy because they were not able, they were at a pivotal point, whether it was reading or whether it was just, learning of the English language. I mean, think about all of the kids that are second, ESL is where they are. They go home and their parents are speaking another language and they're still trying to learn English, and you have mouths covered. But it's more than that too. It's the fact that the whole goal in their statement was not to protect everyone's health. If you listen to Dr. Koh, and when he went on, and brought that up to the board, he mentions we should be putting our young kids 2, 3, and 4
Training.
into masks. Why? So that by kindergarten, they will be fully what?
Trained.
Compliant. Right?
Well, that's
That
what
they will be
compliance is to
compliant.
feed all that.
Right. And that's what we need. Critical thinkers. We need for people who are going to learn how to ask hard questions, how to have civil discourse, how to kind of break the barriers and say, well, let's think about this in a different way. And quite honestly, that is not being promoted in the public school system in Wake County. There are teachers that have left that have told me the reason they left, or they will say now, I could never let anyone know that I am of a conservative, bent, because that would mean that potentially either I wouldn't have my job, or if I
Right.
ever wanted to transfer, or if
Which
I ever
I think
wanted
it's
to.
a travesty that we
It
have
is a travesty.
teachers that are afraid to speak their viewpoint because they think they're going to get some backlash. I mean, we're supposed to be living in a free country. You're supposed to be able to express your ideas and not expect and not be punished for them.
Well, it's only
just
bullying
imagine.
when it's only bullying when the left says it's bullying, so it doesn't matter because
Right.
it happens. Basically your teachers are being bullied to keep their mouth shut or
Mhm.
be unemployed,
Well,
Well,
bullying
just
happens at
imagine.
so many different levels in the schools,
Oh
and they
yeah.
do nothing about it.
Well, just
Well,
imagine if it's hard for teachers, just imagine what the kids are dealing with,
Mhm.
right? What child is going to come out and feel like they can totally talk about their viewpoint or their family's worldview or whatever it might be, and then you're living kind of a double life, right? If you're with your family and they're promoting something and you feel like you can't even talk about it at school, are you really letting people know the true you? Are you really being known and making friends that are sincere and friendships of integrity? No, you're not. I mean, we should be promoting that children can be children. And
Mhm.
I mean, really, I know that so many kids are suffering because our families are suffering, especially with the economic downturn and all of the struggles and everything that went on with COVID and so many people that
mhm.
lost loved ones. I understand that. But you know what? How about we make our schools be a place where we don't have to talk about all of the bad stuff that's going on outside of the school? How about we really focus on what our kids love to do and allow them to learn and allow them to have victories in the schools that can be celebrated by everybody? And absolutely, when there's serious issues, we need counselors to come alongside. We should not be expecting teachers to be counselors and police officers and dietitians and nurses and all these other things. That's why we should absolutely have counselors in school. But I tell you, trying to treat a student in isolation from their family for whatever they're dealing with is not helpful. It's actually harming the situation. I say when a child is suffering, the entire family is impacted, and the entire family needs to be brought into that situation. I do not believe that our schools should become counseling centers. I think that the counselor can talk with the student, figure out
They
what's
can
going on, but
talk
that
to it
they
and
should,
identify it, but it should
right,
not.
identify it, and then we need to refer out. And this is where the DHHS needs to come and get some skin in the game, because the DHHS is getting a lot of money from us and they have a lot of control over what's been happening in our schools, and it's time for the DHHS to look at the budget and to talk about, funding nurses and funding counselors and the things that we need. And then we need to look out into the society, and we need to give you know decreased prices through the school system, through DHHS, to counselors out at large, so that whole families can get the counseling and the help that they need.
Well, you don't
But
need.
kind of circling back on some of this medical stuff, it did not start with COVID. That this They're trying to do medical interventions. I can't count the number of times my kids came home with a note that they had a dental exam at school that day, and
Yeah.
I never was notified ahead of time. Me as a parent, any kind of medical intervention on my child, I need to be notified in advance.
Yeah.
So whether they're getting a dental exam or an eye exam, or the school's promoting vaccinations, or the school's promoting them to behave in a certain way,
Well, see,
anything. That
COVID,
is the realm of the family, the parent, not
but
the school.
but COVID gave them the blanket to do what they wanted to do all along. And had COVID come out in 1995 and 2000, it would have been handled a lot different by the parents because they would have known what the future would come. But now what happened was COVID. The good thing that did come out of COVID, if there's any silver lining, is the fact that parents were made aware of what schools were indoctrinating their children with.
Well, like I spoke when we
right.
first started, that was, I had suspicions, but I didn't have any physical evidence because there were no textbooks or anything for me to refer
Right.
to. But once I saw what they were, their online curricula, there's my evidence. Okay, they're teaching some things that are not appropriate and are not correct, and they are very politically biased.
Well, I and like I said, when you look at the lieutenant governor and you look at his banner, his plight, the way what he has to say about things, I think he has the heartbeat of most North Carolinians. I really do. I think he was brave enough to stand up and say it, brave enough to stand up and do it. And he's being heard all over. I mean, he's being heard all over, not just here in the United States. He's being heard all over the world what he's having to say. And I think that if we all take a page out of his book and continue on with the mission that he sets before us, I think that we can make a change as long as we all stick together and not stay inside, battling each other here or battling each other there, because we all have a positive thought process in this. And I can tell you, I appreciate both of y'all for being out here, putting it all on the line. I know what it's like. I've been out there, and she's seen me out there too. And I do get myself in trouble what I say sometimes, and the Associated Press. And, I had
I'm
a
sure
lady
we
call
all
me.
get ourselves in trouble sometimes with what we say.
Yeah, I had a friend of mine call me from California one morning. He said, "Rick," I said, "Yes." I said, "Man, I ain't heard from you in 30 years. He said, "Well, I hadn't heard from you in 30 years until I looked at the newspaper this morning." And I said, "Well, what are you talking about?" He said, "This thing would," and I put out a meme out there that kind of took off, and I kind of said some things and about some previous television shows, and I compared, and I'll say it, I compared Maxine Waters to Aunt Hester and Trump to Fred Sanford. And I said they emulate the relationship between the two. That show was really ahead of its time because it's such a comparison, such a dislike for each other. So every time I see that Sanford and Son, I think those two right there. And of course, the Associated Press and people tried to turn it in a direction that was not to go. And anyway, somebody was like, "Wow, when you say it, you really throw it out there, don't you?" I said, "Well," and then I got some threats from different places. And, one lady called me one night and said she was going to educate me in history. She wanted me to come to Chicago. And I said, "I'm on the way, buy the ticket." And I won't tell you what she said afterwards, but it's 3:00 in the morning when she called. But she had my phone number. I wasn't hiding from what I said. And I think that's the same thing in our school board members. And that's why I bring that up, is that until we have people standing up and going toe to toe with what the other folks and the different opinions, and I hear words like
our school board for the past few years, especially since COVID, has done a really good job of ghosting, gaslighting parents and to making them think, no, that's really not what happened. I mean, Jim Martin is a master at that. And it's disgusting to watch him and how the rest of the board treat parents. Like they shouldn't even have a say in anything. And how he went off on parents wanting protection of their rights was absolutely uncalled for, and shows a thought process is not in line with our Constitution. And it also shows that they don't understand it. And all of them keep talking about the democratic process, and we're a democracy. It's like, no, we're a constitutional republic. Read the Constitution, please.
Right. Well,
So we have to get in and make people understand that, Michelle lives in her area. She has every right to run. I live in my area. I have every right to run. People they're relocating in from these outside areas just to run, that's very suspicious. But the focus, the school board, Wake County Public School System, the board's responsibility is to manage the funds and to direct and to hire the key staff member of the superintendent to provide that quality education for the kids. So thinking about it, who do you want developing the policies, running a multi-billion-dollar budget, and hiring key executive level positions, but people that have been in business, people who have managed multi-million-dollar budgets? You don't want necessarily a board full of classroom teachers because of, yes, they'll have a great teaching perspective, but you hand them a budget of all that money and they won't know what to do with it. They won't know how to manage it. They don't understand the cash flow process.
But first and foremost, they have to have a plan.
Right.
Right. Or even know how things run. But and I think too, to your point, you guys were talking about what the one good thing, if we can say, that came out of this COVID nightmare was that parents woke up. But here's what we need. Now we need action. It's not enough to know what the intentions were. It's not enough to remember how bad things were, and we tend to have a very short attention span in here in the United States, and we need to remind people that this school board, the other huge job that the school board has is to be a liaison between the legislature, between the district, and between the staff, and between the citizens of the community. Because here's the thing, there are teachers that are not feeling that they have been supported by their administration. They do not believe that they have a voice where they can go to. You know where they should be able to come then? They should be able to come to the board. And if they have tried to discuss things with their administration and they have gotten nowhere and they are at an impasse, they should be able to come to their board member, and we should be able to work as mediators to figure out a solution to this problem. We have got to improve the work environment for our teachers just as much as we need to be improving the classroom learning environment and bringing peace and order and discipline back to the school classrooms. So, but the amazing thing, we have all 9 seats up for re-election in this election in just 42 days. This election will be over. So I want to encourage anyone that is watching. It is not enough to just sit on the sidelines and say, "Oh wow, thanks so much for running. Gosh, I hope that you win. You have my vote." It's time now for all hands on deck. It's time for us to leave it all on the field. It's time for us to put this as a priority, just like we want scholastics and academics to be a priority. This election, now in these last 40 some days, we've got to make it a priority, because we have been handed incredible opportunity. We have strong candidates in every single one of these districts. We can flip this board, and we can make the 15th largest school district go in the direction of where we want it to go in terms of going back to the basics of education, rooting this politically charged, racially divisive, and sexually mature, we haven't even talked about that nonsense, content that's in our curriculum, and go back to respecting parents' rights and parents' authority in their children's lives, and preparing a place where everyone is getting the absolute best preparation for adulthood. That needs to be the goal of our schools, and we have that chance. We've been handed it by redistricting, and we need to help whoever is in your district. Please go and find whoever the conservative candidate is running in your district and help them with money, help them to offer to work at the polls, help them by just talking to all of your friends and getting them to go to the website and to offer to, help to pass out cards or to put signs in your yard, whatever it might be. Everyone can do something. And we need that right now. We don't want to wake up on November 9th and say, wow, I wish I had done more.
Yeah. So I looked at the website, and it looks like the young man that you're in the race with, I see 3 words that he used: trustworthy, collaborative, and knowledge, but I don't see anything about experience.
He's 28.
Yeah.
He's wet behind the ears.
So the experience, I don't see any experience. I see a lot of nice little set photographs, and in the right places and all that, but I don't see a lot of, like I said, a lot of experience in there. I don't. Sometimes when you're talking about the school board and our children, I don't think that's the place where you got to get your first experience.
And I don't think. Yeah, and you're exactly right, Rick. And here's the other thing. You're not seeing who's endorsing him. He's being endorsed by Run for Something, which is a Hillary-inspired PAC that is choosing young progressives that can, quote, hide the progressive, mantra within what they're doing. He's being endorsed by something called the Progressive Caucus of the Democratic Party of North Carolina. He's being endorsed by Equity NC, whose focus is cultural cultural equity and the LGBTQIA agenda. He's also being endorsed by the NCAE. And if you go to their website for Wake NCAE, they talk about White Supremacy 101, BLM, and how to get involved. They're talking about Red for Ed, which is based on a Marxist organization.
And anybody who is endorsed by the NCAE should be a red flag, The
Right.
NCAE does
Absolutely.
not have the welfare and the betterment of our children in mind. All they care about is their political power. I
Well,
mean,
it's the
they
same thing.
lobbied to keep schools closed. They're the ones that scoffed at learning loss and made fun of parents that
Right.
it wasn't real. And here
Yeah.
we are now having reports showing that children are as much as 3 years behind. You know,
Right.
the NCAE does not have our children's best at heart.
And it's important for all of the listeners to understand, because when they hear that it's the teachers union and they think, oh, well, that must be that all of the teachers support that. No, in North Carolina, less than 13% of all of our teachers belong to the NCAE. And by the
And that's
way,
a drop. It was at 17%.
yes,
So
it
it's
was
actually
at
declined
17%.
to
Yep.
13%.
It is declining. And it's important to remember that for the last several months, the president of the Wake NCAE, Christina Spears, has been at the school board meetings, has been cursing at us, has been calling anybody that with a conservative mindset right-wing extremists. They've been calling us bigots, and they have been promoting the pornography that is in our schools and saying that this is culturally relevant and it needs to remain in the libraries. They have been touting that librarians are more able to choose what is appropriate reading material for our children than parents. They have had an absolute attack on the parents and the parents' role in their children's lives. They have been leading the charge along with Jim Martin. And by the way, Jim Martin also is endorsing my candidate. So if you want more of the same, if you want more pushing out of the teachers, more of this taking over of the worldview of your children, if you want
Mhm.
that they think that this is great, everything's fine, no problem about the academic loss. They scoffed at us when we said that there was a report that nearly 50% of the graduates that graduated this past spring, the 91% graduation rate,
Mhm.
nearly 50% of them were not failed their proficiency exams in math and in reading. And did you see the school board members, Becky, when they looked at each other and kind of did that? Yeah, well, I'm
Oh,
sorry,
yeah.
it was reported by ABC News. I don't know where they're getting their data, but maybe you should take it up with them if you disagree with the results. But this is
Well,
the thing.
with Wake Technical College, just one of the stats to throw out for you, is of the students entering Wake Tech Community College, half having to take remedial courses for up to a year before they even can start their associate's program. This is
And
after
I've talked
graduating.
Yes. And with several families from ECU, from Western Carolina, and from App State, and they all said the same thing, that when their students went to the freshman year, it was assumed by those state colleges that if they came from Wake County, that they needed to take a year of remedial math, that they would not be prepared to enter into freshman mathematics at those colleges. So
Mhm.
this is not just something that we're making up. This is known by those higher institutions that we are not preparing our kids for
Yeah,
the
Ricky, I don't
next
know
step.
if you've looked at the math proficiency scores, but just to give you an example, Math 1, which is algebra,
Right.
79% of students were not proficient. 79% not proficient. So that means only 21% were proficient. I mean,
Well,
it's appalling. It's
sounds like
absolutely appalling.
some of the poll numbers for the White House right now, 21%. Did I just say that out loud? Yeah, I guess I did.
But it's the
Right.
same thing when you look at, like, I because I'm a numbers person, I looked at
Right.
the 20-year spread for reading data for third grade reading in 2000. About 12% kids were not proficient. Around 2010, it's when they changed to Common Core, that score went to about 25% not proficient.
Right.
Now with some of these poor curriculum choices and now COVID, it's now up to about 40% of third graders are not proficient at reading.
Well, it's like my next guest coming up now. He's running for sheriff in Granville County. But when you talk about children coming out of these schools being prepared, whether it's a lawyer, whether it's a doctor, whether it's law enforcement officers, they've got to come out prepared. And right now, and it just wasn't COVID. To me, it was noted by COVID, but we've had these problems all along. It's just that they've been able to hide them from the parents, like we talked about earlier. Because I had struggles with my children in school to where I had to really work with my daughter very close daily to get her through school because the system couldn't do it or wouldn't do it. So I fully understand that. So I would love to have you guys back again on another show because we're going to blast this on out there and let people hear what you have to say. Because I think 2 hours is was still not enough. And then as time comes by, more guests, and I'll extend out some hours here and there. That's what makes it when it's your own live show. You can do what you want to do. But I do appreciate y'all being here. Tell me, if you would, I looked at this Daniel L. Grant King. I just Googled him. I just Googled that guy. Does he exist? Is he real?
So I have Michelle. I have the incumbent, Tara Waters, who was appointed by the board. She was not elected. She was appointed to replace the previous representative. Then I also have Daniel Grant King, who he speaks at the school board, and he's always very condescending. He is a supporter of the NCAE and those types of directives. And then there's another person, Dr. Williams, who I really don't know anything about because I also haven't really seen anything about him. He has not made any forums or anything that I've been to. So for the most part, the representatives or the people that I'm running against seem to not be parent friendly. They appear to endorse policies that the NCAE promotes. Right. They're not putting children first, and that's really what I'm wanting to do is put children first and their education above everything else.
Right. All right, Michelle, I'll flip the switch over to you real quick.
Well, I want to thank you for having us on. And I just want the people of Wake County to think about something. If when you are electing someone who is going to represent you, we need to understand that the chances of agreeing with someone 100% of the time are zero. I don't even agree with my husband that much, and we've been married 25 years. So, but what is important is that we are available. We are transparent. We have been fighting in this fight and educating ourselves about what's happening within the school system for years. And we are willingly wanting to be a servant to the people of Wake County. And so it's important for us to look at what the other candidates are doing. And I often say because we've knocked on all doors and people that, vehemently disagree with me on issues, but it's interesting because if you can get to the bottom of kind of the preconceived ideas of who people are because of the stereotypes, we all can agree that we all want the same thing for the next generation. We want our kids to achieve even greater things that we have achieved. We want for them to have lives and careers that are rewarding, that they are excited about getting up and going to work, that are using their gifts and talents and fulfilling their passions. But, I tell people when they just go at it, I finally say, you know what? Maybe you should bring up these issues with your school candidate when he knocks on your door, because they're simply not doing it. I will say those of us that are on this conservative, ticket, we have been working night and day for months on end, trying to earn the vote of our fellow citizens. And while you may not agree with all of our worldview, you might not agree with our politics, you might not agree with how we've chosen to school our children, whatever it might be, I would ask you to just think about this. Who do you think is going to be the best person if you have an issue and you need to address it at the school board level? Who do you think is going to respond to you? The person who you've never spoken with, who you don't see at any events, who is not willing to answer questions, or the people who are? Mm-hmm. And so I just ask everybody to take that thought into account, that we need to stop going with the groupthink mentality of this person bad, this person virtuous, because they're pushing, a political agenda, and look at who really has raised children and been a part of the educational system and has practical solutions that are going to benefit every single student in Wake County.
Well, I appreciate you being here, Becky. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Good luck on your campaigns, and I'd like to follow and get another interview with both of y'all, and get back on here and kind of get updated a little bit more of what's going on, maybe sometime in October as we
Okay.
move forward. And like I said, good luck to you. I'd love to see you pull it out and win it. I always say, I can tell you that I'm 100% behind you, because I am. This isn't a channel for the lighthearted. This is a channel for the truth, and that's what we're going to do here. So thank you, and always remember, it's your America, not theirs. And again,
Thank you so
thank you for
much.
coming. And y'all have a
Thank
wonderful evening.
You guys
Have a good
too.
evening.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
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 All right. For our next guest, we have a candidate from Granville County Sheriff who is running for office in Granville County, of course, and Vance Johnson. How you doing tonight, Vance?
I'm doing pretty good. How about you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. We just, as you see, the candidate board races are pretty hot topics pretty much everywhere right now. But likewise, so is the sheriff's race. It can be very, very tough all over the state. And if you would, tell us a little bit about yourself and your candidacy, and what Granville County looks like you, and what you look like for Granville County, and some of the things in your vision for the sheriff's office. Just give me an introduction to who you are and what you're about.
For 30 years, and I've been a police chief at 2 different agencies. I'm in Henderson. I've done just about every job I think of in those years. I've been a K-9 officer, interdiction officer. I was SWAT commander. I've been an investigator, drug investigator, all of those units at some point as well. I've 33 years been in Granville County. For many of those, I've got 3 grown daughters here and grandchildren, and it's it's pretty exciting time.
Your sound's kind of coming and going a little bit, so we'll continue on. Maybe it'll straighten up a little bit. It's kind of like, but 30 years invested in the county, so that's that's big. Like I said, I retired 35 years. 5 of it was as a reserve officer. So I did 30 full years, and then 5 was the reserve officer. So that makes it tough. But what makes you want to stay in it any longer after 30 years?
There was a lot going on in the sheriff's office, and I was, I enjoy what I do. Number one, I have a good time doing what it. I don't think of it as work. Never have o'clock in the morning phone calls, and it doesn't bother me. And so some of the things going on, it concerned me. It concerned me for the deputies in the office, and I felt like I had something I could add to that.
Yeah, one thing about it is there's always concern with deputies in the sheriff's office, and when it comes to a new sheriff, anytime anybody works for a sheriff, it's as the statute gives them, it's the will and the pleasure of the sheriff. And a lot of times when sheriffs come in, they have a preconceived notion of certain people or certain positions that they like or don't like, or what they want to do, and all that kind of stuff. And so they have to evaluate that. Do you have any kind of preconceived notions of any positions or any one person or anything like that ahead of time with the sheriff's office in Granville County?
I've never operated that way. I think it's an evaluation process. Sit down and have discussions with all the employees, kind of what their visions are, what they think is good, what they think could be bad. Evaluation of what's going on in the people. I don't have preconceived anything. I don't think it's appropriate to go in and think you're going to find something. I think it's you've really got to look at what's there and improve, and what steps you can put in place to make that happen. But you go into look. My dad retired from a sheriff's office, and everybody's tense. So I went through that as a family, and I understand that that's what the deputies go through, and in particular at this time. But I think that no, you don't. I don't come in with any kind of freaking things. I don't have employees. I think that I have no one I'm bringing. It's nothing like that. It's I think that's good employees already there.
So it's always a tough job being a sheriff anyway. And then, and it gets to a thing of trust between the sheriff, new employees, and the communities and things like that. What are some of the, to build that trust, what are some of the things that you're looking at for the agency that would benefit the public?
I think that first and foremost, you have to rebuild trust. I've got to go in. I've got to let people know what my expectations are, be fair, and lay it out so that they're very clear on what they are. And trust amongst the employees, the command staff, and the sheriff before you can ever read. Some of the things that I think is important to build that trust with the community is there's got to be a level of transparency. And as you know, in a sheriff's office, of accountability for a sheriff, there's very little. And I think that's good in some ways, but I think to be transparent and accountable, to me, accreditation would be beneficial for that. I think accreditation for law enforcement agencies would be great for me. There's very few sheriff's offices that are accredited in the state, but I think because there's some transparency on what we're doing then, and the public can see those things.
Right. The accreditation is pretty important. I know Durham County used to be accredited. I don't know if they are now or not. I know the jail may be, but I'm not sure with the law enforcement side. But accreditation does make a difference when you end up in dealing with legal issues across the board, the court systems too, because it shows the standard of training which is set. So in this process, that to get accreditation, and the accreditation managers that come along is the experience that you have to find in an agency. Is that somebody that you would look to? Who would you look to be not maybe a name, but who would be an accreditation person? What would be the ideal candidate for somebody to get an agency accredited?
I've been a part of accredited agency for 2 decades out of my career. I'm very familiar with the standards and the process. A part of the original accreditation and the reaccreditation each time. Familiar with the standards and how they're checked off on. Accreditation manager is someone that in an agency the size of the Granville County Sheriff's time position could handle it, but it would be a lot of work. But I'm very familiar with policies, how to find those policies, and link those policies to police practices, which CALEA standard.
Yeah, CALEA is a tough group of individuals when it comes to that accreditation too, because I've been through the process with the Durham County Sheriff's Office numerous times, and you really got to, if you get it accredited, you're a premier agency for law enforcement. It does set a standard. So looking at the structure of the sheriff's office and the responsibilities of the sheriff's office, you always hear that, well, city or the town is inside the town and maybe fall in the county, but we just deal with things in the county. A lot of sheriffs subscribe to that thought process. where do you see an issue, or do you see an issue with those kind of things that come along? If something happens inside the city via something happens in the county, we all know sheriff's office has jurisdiction everywhere. Do you have as a sheriff, would you have an imaginary line there, or how would you feel about that?
Oh, you can't have lines. I don't think you can be successful that way. I've got other agencies, a lot of federal agencies, all of them across the board, and you can't draw those lines. I know all of the police chiefs in the county got to have a working relationship, especially with the way staffing is across the nation. I think that you got to be able to rely on other. So there's got to be, some collaboration agencies within the county. I think that's vital for me to be successful, and I think it certainly helps agencies to be successful.
So, and this is one of the questions. I actually got a question from a deputy in Granville County. The deputy's driving. He's in another community inside the county. He sees something happen. Somebody violates the law, breaks the law. What would be your expectation of the sheriff? No matter what that situation be, what would be your expectation for that officer, and what would you expect him to do if he was inside, let's say inside Oxford, and just whether it's a simple traffic charge or a crime? What would be your expectations for that officer?
I think that officers have discretion, all depending on the type of crime. If it's a traffic violation, they certainly have the discretion to enforce the law. I don't think that there's any kind of lines there. And I think that relationship with Oxford Police Department would certainly be great, because I think to be able to back one another up and that type of thing. But there's no lines. You don't, when you don't cut things off. We're not some that has all the resources available. I think that the citizens in office, and I think they deserve law enforcement across the board.
Yeah, I agree with that. Now, what do you think are the biggest challenges facing Granville County now from an agency perspective?
From an agency, inside the agency, we've got to build some trust, and we've got to move forward. The last several years have been difficult for the officers and employees. They're difficult, and I think that we've got to move that in a as soon as possible from an agency perspective. There's staffing issues. There's things very quickly. Some things that I've seen that I think we need to change. But I also think that for a 5-year look, I think the growth of the county is something that we need to be very, very concerned as far as how we are able to conduct law enforcement in such a, it's a fear. And those things have got to be watched closely so that we can and provide enough resources when the growth does happen.
Right. So yeah, speaking about growth, I mean, where do you foresee the biggest part of the county, the growth coming to?
Well, it's kind of all over, but Granville County has grown. Creedmoor and Stem and the Wilton area, Butner, all of those areas have grown considerably over the last decade. In Oxford, some quite a bit now, with some major housing developments as we speak. So the growth is going to be pretty much county, extremely large county, but certainly you've got growth happening, and it presents a lot of challenges, not only for law enforcement.
Correct. So equipment, when you look at the equipment for Granville County and pay and salaries for the officers, and when you think about that, and then with the budgets and how COVID has taken a toll on, even on law enforcement, people I don't think realize that COVID has hit law enforcement and their budgets too, based on what we had to do and money not coming and money being cut from the different agencies. How do you feel all that together when you're looking at pay raises or you're looking at equipment and things like that? What would be your relationship with the county commissioners in Granville County? What do you foresee your relationship being with them as you would go further with the agency?
I think I would agree, obviously, because they are the ones who hold the purse strings, so to speak. Use the word forceful, but forceful. There's some critical things that are required and be addressed very quickly. There's some retention issues going on that I think that we can address very, very quickly. I think that it needs to be a cooperative relationship, but certainly they don't need sheriff's office, just like I don't need to be in the business of trying to run the whole county. So it needs to be cooperative. A 30-year history of being able to work with just about anybody. I think it'll be a very good experience.
So you're kind of breaking up a little bit there. Basically, what I guess, and I'll make me wrong on this, is that your mindset is, you can run the sheriff's office. There's certain things that you got to have with respect to getting it from the county commissioners. But the county commissioners also need to understand that you're the chief law enforcement officer. You're the law enforcement officer. Law enforcement, and that's your end of it. They need to respect that half of it when it comes to dealing with budgets and what's needed for the agencies. That's kind of what I was picking up. Is that kind of because you were breaking up a little bit through that process?
Yeah, that's right. Maybe it's cleared up a little bit. That's right. I think it's intake, and I think that I've got a lot of experience with that, and I think its would be fairly good to work with. I mean, but I think that everybody has their lane, so to speak, and I think that I use with that, and I don't think it would be.
Well, relationship with commissioners is always a good thing to have. That's for sure. As you move through, and so what what is your vision? And like I said, you talked about in 5 years, 1, 2, 3. What is your vision for the sheriff's office 1 year from the day you would take office? What do you see in Vance Johnson's sheriff's office, belonging to the people, of course, and within the agency itself as you as their leader? What do you see 1 year from the day that you take office? What is your vision?
I think that in a year, I think you're going to see that patrol will be handled differently. I think, the best way to do this is intelligence-based policing, is data-driven. Current records management software creates maps of hotspots. We're trying to see the patrols will be handled differently. I think that you're going to a very connected group with the community, neighborhood watch programs in all of our small communities, and I want to be heavy. I think a lot of face-to-face needs to happen. Let's face it, I may think something's wrong in a neighborhood, and when I talk to the people there, so I think that there's got to be some face-to-face and some communication in neighborhoods. There's been a small amount of work towards accreditation. Be close to getting at least preliminary. So those are some maybe some highlights from that first one. The way we handle patrols and move staffing around as times are happening I think will be significant and it'll be noticeable.
Right. And I know a lot of times it depends on which agency you are with. I know like when Donnie Harrison was sheriff in Wake County and some of the other counties, certain uniform, certain times the sheriffs wear uniforms, sometimes they don't. It's always that option. I know Donnie, I think, wore his on a regular basis. He always said he's the working sheriff. I used to hear from Donnie, he was the working sheriff, which people see that. What's your thought about more uniforms on the street versus the I guess the detective type mindset where it's less uniforms versus more uniforms from that philosophy? What is your theory on that?
Well, you and I come from the old school policing, right? So I think that he's definitely from on me, but something that I've learned through your first level of force is your appearance, and that I think it makes you recognizable to the public. So if I've got 5 people that address these, it makes it difficult for the public to recognize that they're Granville. So I think that it needs to be uniform as much as possible, plain clothes aspects of it. I mean, that goes without saying. I mean,
right.
you have to, talking about Donnie, I worked with Donnie Harrison when I was a chief in Wake County. He's a working sheriff. I was, I'd see him out at 2:00 in the morning on many occasions, and he was wearing, so he was a working sheriff, and I believe in that. And we have 2 deputies patrolling this huge county. If I need to get out and work at 2:00 in the morning, then your sheriff is going to be out working. I owe that to the citizens, and I think that citizens should certainly demand that. We're going to correct those things, and we're going to fix those things very quickly.
Right. And like I said, I think when people see 5 uniforms and maybe one person wearing civilian, they're going to migrate to that uniform in the first place because that's the signature of authority and where they feel like they're going to get their best bet for safety in the first place. Yes, and definitely the old school process of community policing, knowing your community and things like that. That's kind of where I've always been in law enforcement myself, and where I probably got the best information and probably the best work of my career was working alongside the community, listening to what they have to say and things of that nature. So you did answer that question. What do you think right now would be the biggest challenge that's facing Granville County Sheriff's Office as a whole? What is its biggest challenge right now?
I think there's some funding downfalls. I think there's some trust issues, whether real or we know that perception's reality, and from things that have gone over. It's the last 3 or 4 years has just been for the sheriff's office and the public. So, I think that there's some that biggest hurdle for the sheriff's office to overcome. And like I said, whether it's real or not, and that's where the evaluation process, 30 days going in and finding working what's not, is vital. Notions of anything. Go in and you evaluate what's happening.
Right. And are there any new concepts or new units, or you or revitalize any of the structure? Like give you an example. Durham County came in. I use them a lot, or Wake County. They came in and put in motorcycle units. Orange County, different ones. Maybe the canines, increase their canine units or of those special services. And I asked that because this is some of the questions that the deputies are kind of throwing at me when I was talking to them over the last month and a half is, hey, what are the candidates saying about any specialties that they would like to see within the agency, or maybe working with other groups or other agencies, and what kind of programs would any of the candidates be doing as they move forward in the sheriff's office if elected?
I think the sheriff's office and has enough personnel that we certainly should have an experienced SWAT team to respond, not only well trained, well equipped, and I don't, the equipment is probably best. I've created a SWAT team and been the commander of SWAT entries, so that's important to me, because I think that deals, and that I think that's something we need to work on quickly, but can take a little bit of time. I was a K9 officer and a K9 trainer, and I managed 5 K9 teams. I think that K9 teams now, how we deploy those, we need to look to deploy those. Do we need more or less? I don't know the answer to that. I want to see how they see, how often are we using them. I want to see K9 reports, and that I can see that we're doing searches and that stuff. I think that's important. Granville County does interdiction on Interstate 85, and interdiction team on 85 years and years ago. Our folks and paid them more money, and which was great for Granville County. But I think that program can be very successful if it's handled the right way and they have the appropriate training and the appropriate equipment. And so that's a really good program. I'm all for that. I've been a part of that. So I don't see creating, I think new technology, we need to make sure, I know Granville County has a drone, but do we need to keep that updated, and do we need to grow that program, as large as Granville County is that often? I know that we use ours very often, so that we probably could build on. But there's programs in place.
So yeah, I think, and it gets back to what you talked about earlier, the money from the county commissioners being able to do things of that nature. And I know I haven't heard anything from the other candidates. I don't know what they're really having to say about it, other than what they're posting out on Facebook, things. And I'm hoping that they'll come on and explain their visions. But I haven't heard anything from them. So and like I said, visions are a great thing for sheriff, and the guys always want to be a part of that. Speaking from starting at the lower ranks, and where like we always say, where the rubber meets the road, that's where you carry the heavy load. And a lot of times there's those Monday morning quarterbacks that tell you what you should have done, but they weren't there to help you do it when it needed to be done. Not because they didn't want to be, but because the nature of their job didn't put them there. And
Right.
it's, and we as officers can be our own worst critic as to getting things job, but you always want to do better in the first place. But that comes with me. So when we're looking at training, your training division, what are going to be your key goals for training within the agency? What would be something that you would work within the agency and utilize your training skills of being, training officers, and been doing this training as a police chief in your previous experience, because training makes perfect. Where do you see that as a big asset, and where would you begin that training for your officers and for your training division?
I think that, I've been instructor for well over, mainly in constitutional law and that type of thing, but I've instructed in mix. And I've got probably 3,500 hours of training. What I see is that the shortfall that I see for different individuals is that we need some type of career development program, different training that you can go to. There's no reason that a deputy with 2 years of going to police law institute where you learn to do search warrants and you talk about search and seizure. There's no reason why we should have field training officers we should have first line supervisors that have first line supervision training, and staff should go to the administrative officers management program at NC State. We shouldn't have that career development and that progression in place to make those. It's something simple to put in place. A lot of the training, the local college will do that for you in most cases. Training is a passion of mine, and I think that we certain aspect of it from what I've seen.
Yeah, and I think which kind of add to what you're saying. I think agencies that don't do well within the community, or agencies that don't do well within the courtroom, whether it's through law enforcement or sometimes agents, for law enforcement officers testifying, you can always go back, you equate it back to the type of training that they get, because we all know practice makes perfect. And if you don't get the training, when it comes time to go to work and do what you need to be doing, it can be a struggle for some folks. Courtroom testimony is one of them, things of that nature. So the kind of questions I was asking you tonight were questions that's been thrown out at me probably in the last couple of days, because I've actually stopped up with a patrol car sitting and say, hey, let me ask you a question about the sheriff's race. What are your thought processes? What are some of the questions? So these are all new questions to me at the moment, because it's like anything. It's what's the current trend in the agency? What are the line officers thinking? And what are their thought process? So you got the opportunity to get those questions right straight from the guys, unfiltered. To kind of give your answers. And that's the kind of thing that I always like to do on these interviews, because I think when you see the real person and they get up there and they answer the questions, off the cuff, no prearranged questions, nothing of that. I don't do that. For me, as you see, the questions that I give kind of come off of the questions of the candidate that's running for sheriff, because ultimately, at the end of the day or end of the week, whoever wins, it's going to be their agency to run. And those officers have to believe that what they hear in these candidates is what these candidates, who they are. And in saying that, what would you say to a line officer, to a deputy right now who's working in the road, that you would like their support? What would you say to them? Why should they vote for you as the sheriff of Granville County?
I think that if I'm talking to a deputy that's on patrol right now, with Vance Johnson, you're going to get the support you need. You're going to have, and we're going to get you the training and equipment that you need. I do not, and I have done that many times, and I don't know that. But no longer will you be on patrol with there. If I have to come in and work, then that's what we're doing. I don't think the citizens are getting the law enforcement services that they deserve. And so to that line officers, I'm going to make sure, because the backbone of any agency is absolutely its patrol. Not properly staffed and properly used in the right areas. And I think that's where we've got to concentrate, because that deputy on patrol, 99% of the time, anyone else within that sheriff's office, they need to be properly trained, and and they need to have the proper backup when they're out there on patrol. So that's what you vote for Vance Johnson.
So some of it broke up. So, and because it's kind of breaking up with the internet right now, I'm not sure what's going on. So kind of break that down into a paragraph or two, which you actually covered, because it was very sporadic about what you get.
Yeah, I'll try to be simple with it. If what you get is that I will have your back as a line deputy. If you will not ever, if I have to come and work, you will get the proper training, hands down. If you vote for Vance Johnson, that's what you get from me, and that's what you're going to get from me.
Okay, and was there anything else you'd like to add to this? Because I'm open to any questions or any thought processes that you'd like to talk about. Throughout the county, what would you say to the voter?
Voter, it's it's a while. It was, I think to the voter, we did candidate. I am the only conservative candidate running. I support the Second Amendment, and you hear that. I am the conservative candidate. I have voted for people so I think that's important. I will look after your second. I think that's vital. So get out and vote. The right experience, and I am the right choice, and I'm asking for your vote.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play a video right now for you, for the viewers and all. And then when it's done, I want you to tell me what you think about this video and this individual. And we'll have that conversation. We come back. It's about 13 minutes long. And I may not take it all the way out that far. I'll get to a point I may stop it and come back to you and see what your thought process is on this. So without further ado, I'll let you watch this video.
Okay.
What law enforcement should look like in our state. I've never been a type of politician to make promises. I never stood on the stage and said, I promise you that if I'm elected, I'll never do that. Except this once. Now I'm gonna tell you the promise I'm gonna make. And any of y'all know me know that I believe that God is organizing my footsteps. And if God should see fit to make me the governor of this great state, if it is his will that I serve the people of North Carolina in that capacity, then I make this solemn promise. Might not be day one, might not be day two, but I guarantee you by day 3, we're gonna call a press conference. And that press conference is gonna be me, and that press conference is gonna be the chiefs of police from across the state, the sheriffs from across the state, the DAs from across the state, and I'm gonna line them up in front of me, and I'm gonna point out to the cameras, and I'm gonna tell the criminals and the thugs and the rioters and the bombers and the burners and the statue puller downers, it's a new day in North Carolina, and you will not be tolerated anymore. Law and order is back in the house, and somebody is here to stand up for these men and women in blue that put their lives on the line for us. We will no longer tolerate your foolishness, and if you don't believe me, just try it. It's high time in this nation and in this state that we stood up once again for law enforcement. The dreadful effects of what has happened since this whole era of defund the police, we're not talking about something that's just cost money. We're literally talking about something that has cost lives, destroyed lives. And it is time for elected officials to get a spine and a backbone and once again stand behind the men and women of law enforcement so that they can be proactive in what they do, not reactive in what they do. And I make that solemn promise now that that will happen. And we have another vision. We got another vision out there on the horizon. We got a vision where when a man or woman retires from Fort Bragg, Camp Lejeune,
Let me try to take the mute off there. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I got you. Hear me?
Yeah, I got you. So from a law enforcement, it was a little choppy there for some reason. I think we're having issues on the internet, both sides tonight. But anyway, so when you hear that, what is the first thing you think of citizens in Granville County? What's your thought process?
It's about time. You know, I think that that we stand up for law enforcement across the board, and to have somebody, I've actually met him and heard him speak several times, and he's so passionate. And what he's telling you, I find law enforcement, and it's about time. You know, we've got to rebuild. We can't hire people. You know, you can't find a 20-year-old and say, "Hey, you law enforcement." It's difficult, you know, and we have got to rebuild law enforcement. And what that man is saying right there is the truth. Citizens' need from me as sheriff is that you need to know that with crimes, I'm going to do all I can to put them in prison. It's not about being soft. You go out and build relationships, and when you can help people, you help them, and serious crimes are committed, they need to go to jail. That's all it is to it. It's that.
So he's pretty powerful in what he has to say. I've known Mark a while now, and he sure gets committed to what he believes, what he says. You know, and everybody knows that where I stand with Mark. So it's not like it's a big secret. But he's always looking for the strong sheriff that'll stand up and support law enforcement and support those around him. And then he's going to support those out there, the men and women in uniform. And I've never heard him not. And I guarantee I don't think he will ever be in a position that he doesn't. But if he runs for governor and he becomes the governor, do you as a sheriff feel that you can support him with his efforts and his ability to manage a team and put all you guys together?
I think you just heard the same. Absolutely. I mean, what more could you ask for? You're a law enforcement leader from somebody to say that I've got your back, and we're gonna, and you know, it's absolutely. I mean, you can't.
It's kind of what you were saying about the deputies a while ago. I mean, some of it was coming in and out, having their back. You know, it does make it tough. I mean, law enforcement for some time now with this defund the police movements. And we're now reaping what we sowed by allowing that nonsense to go on, because crime is up in the country all over the place. It's off the chart. You add inflation to that. I mean, you add the different things. It doesn't matter what you add to. The fact is that you don't support law enforcement. You're seeing what crime is doing to this country. So, you know, as law enforcement, we can't set it out. We have to be into the game 150%. But when we do that, we have to have people who are there to support us and that have our back. Because when the chips are down, the only thing that you can guarantee and depend on is that two groups that are going to be there, other than the military, is going to be law enforcement and fire department. They're coming and law enforcement's coming. So there are two different entities right there. And I think we need leaders like that come along every chance we get to use them to be part of their team. Like I said, I'm glad to see that we have somebody who's not a standard politician, who says what's on his mind. He feels it, he believes it, he sees it, he lives it, and I think he'll take it to the limit where it needs to go. And again, I think he's looking for sheriffs that'll do the same thing. So I really appreciate you being here. I haven't heard from the other candidates in Granville County yet. I've sent out invites to them, but have yet to hear anything from them. And then I'd like to talk about the campaign and see what's going on there from your side, your perspective, and just see what's going on and what's happening in the community. And you can enlighten us to some of the things that you're hearing and seeing along the way. And at this, I'm going to leave the last words with you before I sign off. So you got the next few seconds, minutes, whatever you want to do. The floor is yours.
All right, I'd like to take a moment to congratulate Sandy Smith on that Trump, and she endorsed me about a month ago, and I know Sandy well. I know she was excited about that, so I wanted to congratulate her on that endorsement. Appreciate you having me on the show. I think that people need to do their research. I think that it's to me what's most important is with the experience and the training to step in on day one, right direction. And I clearly have the right experience, and I am the right choice. Do your research. I'm asking for your vote. Get out and vote. Voting starts and vote. Of course, election day is November 8th, and I'll see you at. Please reach out to me. I've got Facebook, website, my phone number is fairly accessible. I've got email. There's different locations, Facebook and website. So please reach out if you've got questions, suggestions. I'm open to anything. I'll listen to whatever you got to say.
Oh yeah, this internet's spotty tonight. I don't know what's going on. It showed strong signal, but it's a tough task being the sheriff. And it's tough task running for sheriff as you're finding out. It's always, being a police chief is one thing. Then having to run politically for an office is a totally different ball of wax. But in the same sense, the experience and the character of being in law enforcement affords you the ability to understand why you want to do what you want to do. I know it did for me when I was running office several times. So, Chief, I appreciate you being on here tonight and being able to explain who you are, what you want to do, and what you hope to accomplish. And hopefully we can get a better internet connection the next go round and make sure we can clear everything up and just talk about what's going on. That's what this show's all about. I'm not like I tell everybody, I go, well, yes, I'm a conservative. The show, from a standpoint, I'm conservative, but I'm going to give everybody respect when they sit in the chair and answer questions, because I think and you never know, you might hear something you actually like. Once I always tell everybody in the past, and being a leader, is that if you take all the issues that you don't agree on and you put them to the side and work on the issues that you agree on, you might find out there's somewhere in the middle that you can come up with some other fixes on some other. You may not always go, full sail on somebody else's opinion or position, but you can always come out with a doable, fixable plan to move forward to some semblance of success from both sides. And I think I like to carry that way with this show also, is that yes, we're conservative. I'm conservative, but I do listen to other ideas, and sometimes it's a lot easier to work together on things. But in the same sense, I'm ultimately this is a conservative program. I don't hide the fact that's what we are. I'm not going to sit there and say we're not. But I thank you for being here tonight. I'm glad you're here. I'm hoping the other two candidates will respond. I know one of them right now has another issue he's dealing with. and I'm not even going to go into that. And then the other one, I'm not sure if he's going to respond to the email or not. But if you hear this, if I've sent you an email and you haven't responded to it, feel free to reach out to me because I'd love to have you on the show too. And with that being said, again, thanks, Chief, for being here. Hope you have a great day. And to the rest of the public out there, always remember one thing. It's your America. And, you know, it's not the White House America. It's not government's America. It's the people's America. So in closing, always remember, it's your America, folks. And have a great evening. Have a great night. And I'm glad that you stopped by and stopped in. And we'll see you the next show.